Hello, everyone. My name is Amira Resnick. I'm happy to be with you, and we appreciate you joining our session today. We're excited to showcase our work out in California and share a bit about our NTAE project. As Melanie said, our process, we're going to give you a taste of the content that we delved into and some of our lessons learned. We will have some engagement by polls and reflections. So hopefully you'll be ready to participate with us in those. As I said, I'm Amira. I'm statewide director of community nutrition and health with UCANR, and I'm joined by two other presenters today. Russ Hill from our 4-H program, and Catherine Soul, who is currently serving as director of the Health Equity Initiative with our SNAP-Ed program. One of the things I liked most about this project is that it brought people together across our statewide programs teams, and I think that really made for a powerful and impactful experience. I want to introduce you briefly to our organization. The University of California is the land-grant university in our state. We have an extensive footprint throughout the state with over 300 academic positions, over 300 community educators, and we are working across all of our 58 counties. We have colleagues located across multiple campuses, and our headquarters is in Davis, California. We are going through a strategic planning process right now, but through our 2020 through 2025, we've been guided by these strategic initiatives pertaining to water quality, invasive pests, sustainable ecosystems, sustainable food systems, and healthy families and communities. So within this Healthy Families and Communities initiative, we have our Community Nutrition and Health Unit that I mentioned I work within, and it was previously known as our Nutrition, Family, and Consumer Sciences Unit for those of you who have those in your organizations as well. Within this unit, we've done some strategic planning of our own the past couple of years. And so on the slide, you see our updated mission and vision statements. We have here an emphasis on promoting holistic health. That means integrating many interrelated health topics that affect all of us. And we have a deeper emphasis on advancing health equity together. When we started our NTAE project, our UC Master Food Preserver program was part of this unit. It has since been affected by org restructuring, and now it's within our Sustainable Agriculture and Research Extension program, referred to as the SAREP program. But I want to introduce you to our UC Master Food Preserver program. This is really the focus of the project we're going to talk about today. So let's do our first poll to get your engagement now. We are wondering from you, how many of you are familiar with food preservation? So you can let us know, please, in the chat. We'll focus on the first question for now. Are you very familiar, somewhat familiar, or not so familiar with food preservation? This could be from your own experience, or maybe you have a similar program in your organization as well. Have you attempted things like canning, pickling, freezing, or dehydrating? So I'm seeing lots of folks that are familiar. I'll let Russ decide when we have enough results to share out. And our second question here is if you're working on cultural competency related projects, because this is also what we focused on. So good to know that many of you are and many of you aren't. So nice spread there as well.
We're just about ready to close the poll. All three questions were populated in one poll, but you can answer all of them for us right now, and we'll share those results with you. Oh, and if you've had any experience with canning or food preservation, put in the chat pod what you've done. And we'll share the results. So we have almost a 50-50, very familiar or somewhat familiar with the food preservation program, Master Food Preservers. And then we're at about a 47 to 30%. Are you familiar or working in cultural competency with your projects? And the last question was regard to IDI, and we can talk about that as well later on. Good. Amira, go ahead.
Thanks everyone for participating. Thanks, Russ. Yeah, our UC Master Food Preserver program, it's a volunteer educational program across more than 20 of our counties in California. It's driven by lots of passionate people who want to spread the joy of food preservation. And central to our mission is assuring that we're teaching how to do so in a very safe manner, and to focus on food safety, avoid any and all cases of botulism specifically. We have a strategic plan for this program as well. It's guiding us to consider additional strategies and outcomes of reducing food waste and increasing food security. So this direction has given us the opportunity to reach many more Californians because unfortunately, food security is a massive problem in our state. I'd argue even more threatening to public health collectively than botulism may be. And the goal of working to address food waste really makes this program relevant now to every single Californian. So it opens up a lot of opportunity by focusing on these impact areas for us to reach additional people, regardless of their experiencing food insecurity. Everyone is trying to address food waste as a important issue across our state. So this is the foundation for one of our strategic goals within this direction for the program, which is around increasing diversity, cultural relevancy, and inclusion to better serve all Californians. We have a very diverse state in many different ways, specifically racially and ethnically, and we want to reach the different culturally diverse populations that represent our state's demographics. Especially if we want to work with folks who have lower income. This is a very culturally diverse population because, you know, simply speaking, people of color have been systematically excluded from many economic opportunities for many years. And so if we want to focus on the lower income community, we have to be able to work across many different cultures. So this brings us to the focus of our project, which is on cultural competency or cultural humility. And it's essentially the skills and abilities to work effectively with people across a multitude of communities and cultural communities. So our focus on cultural competency is because research has indicated that building intercultural competence among staff is critical to reaching diversity and inclusion goals in organizations. We have more of a justification for this work to share with you. I'm going to pass it over to my co-presenter, Catherine, to speak about the next slide.
Thank you, Amira. Hi, everyone. So we decided to create a logic model to kind of help inform what we were doing with this project. This started with our inputs, so the things that we would be needing to bring to the project in order to be successful. And this included things like people and the programs and structures and resources, as well as our partners and funding. And then we were thinking about what we would want to see in terms of output. So if we were successful, what kind of products would we have as a result? And these included things like our direct education, being able to do programming in person, as well as webinars and trainings and conferences, who would be participating and how we would be approaching this through a cultural competence, evidence-based and experiential learning lens. As well as what sorts of policy systems and environmental changes we would like to see, the settings in which we'd be doing that work. And here we were looking at utilizing a socio-ecological model framework, as well as thinking about social determinants of health and DEI. And then finally, moving into our research and evaluation outputs. So what kind of research would we be able to do in terms of exploring changes in knowledge and behaviors, assessing our different interventions and approaches, as well as doing feasibility assessments of new delivery and educational approaches, evaluations of the actual programs that we were implementing, like the IDI group and individual orientations, as well as things like our program values and reach. And some of the methods that we were looking at utilizing for this research included analysis of our IDI group and individual reports, interviews, focus groups, surveys, and then actual data collected from our program participants. And for frameworks and theories, in terms of our research and evaluation, we were thinking about things like community-based participatory research, health equity frameworks, behavior change theories, and our intercultural development inventory. We were really thinking about how would we know if we were successful in the work that we were doing. And so we identified short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcomes. And short-term outcomes looked at an increase in the number of volunteers and staff who completed our IDI programs, as well as improvement in individual and group IDI assessment scores. Medium-term outcomes, we're looking at things like the number of volunteers who are members of specific populations in our communities, number of programs that engage specific populations in our communities, number of partnerships that we have with community-based organizations that are serving those populations, things like the number of pounds of local produce that we diverted from the landfill into our programming and into our communities' homes, whether or not people were practicing safe home food preservation methods to reduce food waste, and the percentage of program participants by race or ethnicity as reflected by our broader communities. Long-term, we were looking at making condition changes in public values. So we're looking to contribute to healthier California by improving public health and reducing healthcare costs, creating and contributing to abundant, healthy food by increasing access to foods, including affordable, safe, and healthy food, supporting economic prosperity through improvements in individual financial stability, and contributing to an inclusive and equitable society, so that we were helping California experience greater access to social and economic opportunities and advancements through our programs. So that's a quick overview of our logic model, and I'll pass it back to Amira.
Thanks, Catherine. You can see we had what I felt like was a really thoughtful approach to our work. And again, bringing people together across teams really helped challenge and make a robust process for how we want to work on this together. So next I wanted to share a taste of how we navigated some of the content with our program participants. I mentioned that the Master Food Preserver program at UC is a volunteer-driven program. And so we were hoping to engage volunteers and staff alike who lead the program in their communities across the state. We expected that these topics may be new to some people, and so we wanted to start by introducing basic concepts. I really like this visual that you see on the slide of the cultural iceberg. When many of us think of culture, we think of the most visible or the most sensory stimulating parts of culture. It could be the food or the music or the clothing, you know, the languages, etc. But this is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's many less visible or invisible components to culture that any of us identify with. And this includes our body language, our family expectations, our personal values. Really, our whole worldview can be shaped by the cultures that we grew up in. By one definition, culture is the acquired knowledge people use to interpret our experience and generate behavior. So this brings us to our first reflection question for you. Think about a time when you've worked with someone from another culture. What is most challenging for you in engaging with people from other cultures, and what has been most rewarding? So give you a few minutes to think about that and how it resonates with your experience.
And if you'd like to, you can add your thoughts to the chat pod.
Thanks, Russ. That would be great to hear if anyone wants to share by chat. I'll share for myself. Some of the most rewarding experiences for me has been working with people across cultures and getting really to learn about different cultures. I've enjoyed that myself. Just recently, I was at a conference with some teammates I hadn't spent a ton of time with before. We had the chance to go to dinner together and talk more informally and socially to get to know each other. Several of them were sharing experiences from immigrating to the US, from other countries, and what that was like, how they balanced family life and work life, and you know, the connections that their children had to their countries of origin, and just really really enlightening to hear about the experiences they had and made me really admire and respect how strong they are. In terms of challenges I've experienced, I've been in the situation of reaching out to make new partnerships with organizations that are dedicated to serving specific cultural groups. And it's happened where if I don't hear back from them, or let's say I don't build a partnership in exactly the way that I was envisioning initially, it makes me wonder if the different cultural assumptions or expectations that we have could be presenting a barrier, could be somehow getting in my way of wanting to engage with this group. So there's just a couple of examples, and maybe they're relatable to your experience as well. But definitely feel free to share anything that you would like to in the chat on this topic. When we presented this question to our cohort of our program team, we actually asked people to write notes into a Jamboard slide. We kind of collected their share outs, and that helped us inform future learning opportunities that we planned for the group later on. So another concept is this idea of dominant culture. And we feel like this one is important to share because it affects how cultures interact. So in all societies, whether it's even groups or amongst teams or even pairs of individuals, there can be a power dynamic where one set of cultural concepts and practices is assumed to be proper or preferable. And this is harder to notice if you identify with the dominant cultural position, but it can be very noticeable if you have a differing or alternative cultural perspective of what's considered the norm. So without an understanding of this concept of dominant culture, we can remain unaware of the potential barriers that keep us from being effective in working with others and developing strong collaborations. So one way of thinking about the skill set that we develop to be more effective in this work is called intercultural competence. And this is our next concept here. This is the ability to be adaptable, to shift our perspective enough and adjust our behavior enough to allow us to engage effectively across differences. So for this project, we had the goal to select a framework, and we chose the IDI framework. We asked about this in the poll earlier. I think, Russ, most people were unfamiliar with the IDI framework, so we'll introduce it to you here. IDI stands for the Intercultural Development Inventory, and the IDI continuum is what you see on this slide here. There are other products out there to measure cultural competence. We have had experience with this one, so we chose this one. It's really widely used across many organizations and universities in particular. Actually, it's very highly regarded. So that's why we went with this one. Yeah, some of you are familiar with it. So the IDI assessment is taken at the individual level. It shows which learning stage you are along this continuum, and it produces for you an individualized learning curriculum based on that level. If you do the IDI as a group, like we did with our program, you get to see where most of your members are along the continuum and adjust your learning opportunities accordingly. So just to talk through real quick this continuum, denial and polarization on the left of the arrow represent a monocultural mindset focused on kind of one cultural perspective, and acceptance and adaptation off to the right-hand side reflect an intercultural mindset where you're able to adapt and accept and navigate many different kinds of cultural perspectives. This in between, the middle stage called minimization is very common stage for organizations to be at. This is a transitional or transitional stage of intercultural development. Our group, when we took the assessment, we were found to be at this stage of minimization, like many organizations are. As I said, we offered the assessment to staff and volunteers. We had an initial cohort of 15 people who took the IDI. And then we held a group debrief about the experience, and we proceeded to hold 4 different small group learning circle sessions in order to engage the topics of along the continuum and to identify individual goals for building skill and practicing skill sets, and really to create a supportive learning space and also some shared accountability for the individual work that it takes to advance along this continuum and grow your skill set. So we have a couple examples too of what we covered in these sessions. We dug into what does it mean to be in minimization. So that's there's a lot of messaging in our society that can reinforce a minimization perspective around cultures. So this focuses on what we have in common with people across cultures versus what makes us different. It assumes that people are essentially really like us. It can also be for people in a non-dominant cultural perspective, it can be a coping strategy. People looking to assimilate to the dominant culture and not want to rock the boat. That can be characteristic of a minimization perspective. For people with the dominant cultural perspective, it can be, you know, an honest unawareness of how our ideas are even tied to culture in the first place. So lots of different ways to think about what this means in this stage. The primary, at least one of the primary learning objectives at this stage is increasing self-awareness of our own cultural identities and just the impact of culture on our own lives in order to be able to embrace that there's a lot of different cultural perspectives out there that are important to navigate. So this brings us to our next reflection question for you on self-awareness. Which elements of your own identity have most impacted how you think and what your attitudes are, your beliefs and ideas and behaviors? This image is an identity wheel or a diversity wheel. You can reflect on which elements of your identity have been the most impactful in shaping the way you think, etc. So maybe there's elements of this wheel, hopefully you can read it okay, that you haven't thought much before about impacting your identity. Those actually are good ones to spend some time with, to consider, acknowledging that others may have been very impacted by those particular elements of their own identity. So I'll give you a minute to reflect there. Again, feel free to share anything you want in the chat about the elements of your identity that have been most impactful in shaping how you see the world and how you engage in the world.
And we will share that, as Amira's shared a couple of these reflection questions, these are examples of tools that we'll use in our cohort discussions with our small groups, and help them think through this process to really start doing a deeper dive into understanding their own culture first, right? So if we can understand where we're coming from, and then we approach that after we've done our IDI assessment and getting our orientation, these are all tools that we would use in there, but this is just a small component of it. Thanks for participating as well.
Great, Russ, and you're up next to share out about the next segment.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide here, go ahead and keep thinking about that reflection question, because a lot of that really does kind of drive how we approach the world and the work that we're trying to accomplish, whether it's personal or public or part of our business work, right? So I wanted to share a little bit about how this project came along. So I'm coming to this as a practitioner in the 4-H youth development world. I'm a IDI qualified administrator, and we undertook this process in California back in about 2015, 2016, because we had a USDA review that looked at California's youth participation in the 4-H youth development program, and the determination was, we had multiple determinations, but basically we needed to improve the diversity of our program. It was a mostly white 70-some-odd% youth program, and that did not match California's demographics, which was about 52% Hispanic, Latino in our program. And so those numbers were not matching. And so we needed to figure out a way to work with our staff and work with our volunteers. So the project that's happening now, what Amira is sharing and Catherine are sharing, is a adapted program of what the 4-H program started, which was a change-making process. We really need to undertake a change to our system to really make this stick, make it happen. And so this process was an integrated conceptual framework. So I've put up 3 different frameworks up here. These are things you won't need to remember. So there's a transitional, a theoretical, trans-theoretical model. That's the TTM, the stages of change there. So you pre-contemplation, contemplation. We also used this diffusion of innovation model, and then put that together with Kotter's 8-step change model. So we're looking through how do we get to this end? We were looking at starting with creating this urgency. The urgency was there because the USDA say this is a review. We're not doing this. It's not a, you didn't go through a process just for us to highlight it and check a box. You need to do this. Californians are not receiving the same benefits at the same levels based upon the diversity in your state. And so the urgency was there. And so you go through each of these steps. We built a coalition of people early on. There was 7 of us who participated in the IDI qualified administrator process to become qualified administrators to provide feedback to those who participate later on. We communicated the vision to our leadership, to our internal audiences. We wanted to create these quick wins. So we identified people who had the opportunity to go through the process of IDI QAs and show that it is a process that we can grow within a year. We can build our intercultural competence, and I'll show you a little bit later on how that happened. We built the change. We showed that there could be over a year and then 3 years into this, that there was change from beginning to the end. And I'll show those numbers here in just a moment. But the biggest part of this really was, it was an integrated conceptual model. This framework wasn't just one piece. We had to take multiple pieces. And I think I saw Catherine and other folks in the chat pod were having a conversation about how do we do this? It's that first step. What do you do to make things happen? And so if we step back to the very beginning, it really was this Kotter's 8-step change model that really got us moving. And then the folks with MFP, the Master Food Preservers, adapted the program that we had developed and for the context of master food preservation. Next slide, please. So this was the project plan. So when in 4-H and the Master Food Preservers, we wanted to work with our volunteers. In California, we had multiple thousands of volunteers. We realized soon enough that was going to be very difficult for us to do with a very limited number of staff. So the first thing we needed to do was build the capacity of our institution, and that was working with our staff. So it was a voluntary process that we asked staff members to participate in the IDI assessment. The IDI assessment's about 100 questions. It'll take you about 45 minutes to an hour to complete that process. You answer that. And then immediately we would have your results. And we built 2 things. One is there's an individual assessment, and then there was a group assessment. So what that did, and if you think back to that arc, the continuum that Amira had shared earlier, we were in minimization as an institution. So we had people across the spectrum, anywhere from polarization, denial, all the way to acceptance and adaptation. And so we complete that assessment. The next step was to conduct these individual feedback sessions. So individuals like myself, Amira, Catherine, and others then provided a feedback session on the results of the assessment to the individuals who participated, going through all the pieces and sharing where they're at and the steps that they would need to take over the next year to make change, make movement from the orientation in which they were currently at to the next step or beyond. And so those were concrete steps, part of this individual plan. We then undertook these learning circles. These learning circles were individuals who were in the same actually, let me put it this way. The first cohort we did this in, we put people from different orientations into like cohorts. That means we had people from denial all the way through adaptation in the same learning circles. We thought that they could help learn from each other, but we quickly learned in the next year that actually people were having different conversations based upon where they were at on the orientation. So if you're in acceptance and adaptation, you're having a different level of conversation about what it means with cultural competency than those who are in polarization and denial. And so we learned a lesson, and we did some different groupings. So that was these learning circles. The next step was to have these, in our case, it was a statewide conference, a 2-day conference. And for the Master Food Preservers, they were regional trainings or conferences that were hosted just based upon our availability and so on. These conferences were held as a group. We would bring in presenters and topics and discussions and go through lots of other resources to help build as a team. Then we took a post-IDI assessment, and the post-IDI assessment was to see if there had been change based upon your participation in group learning, in regional conference learning, and then your individual work. So creating your own goals and doing that on your own. And then if we could show the change, and there was change in our program, we would then plan our next cycle. So we had enough in 4-H to do 3 years of cohorts. So you do 1 year, you do it, and then you can do it again the next year, and it's a whole new set of questions, a whole new set of supports for you to build your intercultural competence. And so that was sort of the project plan. And the Master Food Preservers adapted to that and modified for their own contexts. Next slide, please. Using the 4-H example, we had learned that about 4 hours a month with IDP. So the IDP means Individual Development Plan. So based upon where your assessment was, if you're in minimization and you're trying to achieve acceptance or adaptation, then if you put about 4 hours a month, 40 hours in a year of specific and intentional time, you would have, and we could show, a measurable gain in your intercultural competence. So here's the outputs, what actually happened, the impacts, not the outputs, the impacts of what happened. We had a significant growth in the diversity of our youth participation in California. We saw enrollment increase 39% from 2014 to 27 to nearly 102,000 youth. So we have different ways that we measure enrollment. So there's group enrollment, there's individual enrollment, there's all these other things. But this was individual enrollment where they paid a fee to participate in California 4-H. And the Latino youth participation increased by 151%, 45,528%. So we saw a major increase. And that was one of our goals, was to increase Latino youth engagement at that time. And for one of the first time in our long history, we were in parity for Latino, African American, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islander youth during that time frame. So we think, in addition to the other work that was happening, because this wasn't the only thing that was happening, because of the intercultural competency work, this gave our staff the skills to look at and how to engage their local communities and their 4-H clubs to increase both capacity and the ability to increase our Latino youth engagement. So this puts us all into a place of thinking about the synchronicity of the program. So Master Food Preservers and 4-H work together, brought together by folks like Catherine and our colleague Dorina Espinoza. I wanted to give a shout out to Dorina. Dorina passed away a year ago, but she brought this team together and did a lot of work with us because she was doing both food and nutrition and 4-H youth development, and she was integral to our individual, our IDI program. And it was that synchronicity that she brought together working with Amira that brought me into the team, a couple of our other colleagues, to work together to help the Master Food Preservers develop their own version of this for the Master Food Preserver program. We had advisors, and advisors in California, we have a research appointment. So we are required to do research and extension, but we also had practitioners, folks who are like Amira and Sue Mossbecker, who are doing this work to make sure it happened. Like they're on the ground doing these activities, putting together the conferences, doing all the administrative tasks. And then we work together for this cross collaboration, which I think is the key to the success of making this an institutional system. So it wasn't just 4-H doing this, because if it was just 4-H, just the 4-H folks were going to be doing this, right? So Master Food Preserver was next, nutrition and family consumer sciences prior to where we're at now. All of these things make it an institutional change, not just a programmatic change. And I think that's what I have to go on to the next slide. Amira, that's you.
Thanks, Russ. So much to learn from the 4-H example. And like he said, getting to collaborate across statewide programs was really one of the benefits of this project. Another huge benefit being that the Master Food Preserver program is lean and mean, smaller than the 4-H program. We did not have a ton of communications assets, but the NTAE project really helped us develop some nice tools. So on this slide, you see I think this is the e-zine. We were featured in the magazine put out by the project. We were able to develop a case statement with support from the consultants with the NTAE project. And so that was also a great benefit of being able to participate in the NTAE program. And I recommend it if you haven't pursued this opportunity to look into it. We also got support from the consultants on our evaluation process and how we thought through our evaluation. So actually, these are on our website. And if you want to actually see these resources, you can visit our Master Food Preserver website, mfp.ed. uc.anr. Maybe someone can put our link to the website in the chat. Thank you. So now we're getting to some of the takeaways of the project that Russ kind of explained in detail. And you see, he mentioned Darina, that she's featured on our slide here. Really beloved colleague that was pivotal to this project, and we miss her. She was another core member of our project. You know, we had various things that came up unexpectedly. Russ had a sabbatical. I went on maternity leave. So there was lots of, you know, life and death that happened in our project that, you know, for me, underscored the need to expect the unexpected. And I guess no matter what project you're working on, but being able to pivot and adapt. Another way that we had to pivot and adapt was realizing and getting the feedback that the intercultural skill set and the goal of skill building wasn't as resonant to everybody as are some, you know, motivation around practical to-dos and tangible things that people can pursue. And so others were interested in the project, even if they didn't take the assessment and participate in the learning circles, but they wanted to focus on these tangible actions. And so instead of expecting that each person do their own work to identify an individual goal to work on, for example, we ended up supporting the whole program. Anybody that was interested to practice their skills by reaching out to the local food banks, learning about the demographics of the people that those food banks serve, and preparing relevant resources to share with them about food preservation topics, you know, ideally related to the food items that they would be most likely to receive at the food bank. We had a good response. 13 of our local programs participated in engaging with their local food banks during this project. They disseminated 19 different kits that were created and distributed to the programs, the local programs, and they included things like food preservation tips, various recipes, etc. And they were made available in English and Spanish as well. So we anticipated through this effort that 1,400 people were expected to be served with that shift in our program. The other personal takeaway that I wanted to share is that we acknowledge that, you know, the skill building work with the IDI, as important and as impactful as it is, it doesn't necessarily address the systemic barriers that we still face. So one of the biggest issues with our MFP program is that we don't have enough culturally relevant recipes or educational materials in all the languages that our communities speak, all their primary languages. So this is definitely an issue that we're continuing to work on and address in parallel with all the skill building work that we want to continue to do. The
Amira?
structural, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to share also one thing of major importance I wanted to share here too was, or of important note, was that as part of our process, participating in the IDI was both a voluntary and confidential process. So one's individual results were never shared with others, and the individual feedback that we as qualified administrators provided to the individuals who participated in the program were confidential. The results could never be used as part of your employment process, none of that stuff. This was it was a dual goal. One was like, it's a personal growth model, but it's also an institutional change model, right? So it's not that we're going to go out and share these results. We had group IDI results when we had enough. We could say our organization as a whole is in minimization as an average, but we would never share those individual results.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, there are a lot of considerations and nuances, and maybe we'll have time to discuss if anyone has questions or wants to get into it more about working with staff and or volunteers and slightly different considerations for all of them. So one was, I would have expected going into the project that our staff would be more readily available, being that they're, you know, paid to work on the program. But it actually was the case that because a lot of our staff are very part-time and they already have a lot on their plate, our volunteers were, you know, by comparison, more in the numbers, more available for this work than our staff was, at least initially. And so looking to engage both groups in different ways and be able to make accommodations is definitely helpful. In a couple cases, we were able to add time to our part-time staff who wanted to participate but felt they didn't have the time within their current responsibilities. So that was one thing that we adjusted for. The other thing here on this slide around structural barriers is the organizational restructuring that I mentioned. So the MFP program is now housed within our SARET program with great leadership and priorities there. But different opportunities and different approaches for leading the team forward from here. Wrapping up our slides, and so get ready for some discussion and questions if you have them. We'd love to be able to address them. But just wanted to share with you some of our lessons learned. Definitely have learned a lot, maybe different things that we had expected, but there is a lot we can leverage moving forward. So because of the interest that the team had in doing outreach to and with the food banks, there's definitely an opportunity to do more of that, a lot of enthusiasm and energy on that front. We've also been nurturing more collaboration between the MFP program and our FNEP team. And so our FNEP team primarily serves lower Spanish-speaking communities that exclusively focuses on lower income communities. And this FNEP audience also has a great interest in food preservation topics. There's really a win-win opportunity for collaborating across the two programs. FNEP also focuses on food safety. So there's just a lot of synergy to nurture, and that's an area we've continued to work on with monthly convenings of both volunteers and staff that are interested in that topic. I mentioned our division is also working on translation projects. We fortunately have some of a budget we can spend on that. And our division-wide efforts on addressing translation is also really helpful to continue working on those systemic barriers. Also, we got training from our division to host some more trainings on, we got funding from our unit to host, or our division to host trainings on cultural competency topics, skills for extension, and also in engaging diverse communities. So this is a planning process that's underway. Certainly hope to make it available to as many of our statewide teams as possible. And we have various other efforts that are focused on health equity across our organization too. And so, yeah, I'll pause to see if Russ or Catherine wants to offer anything there before we open it up for discussion.
Catherine is now joining us by phone, and I do not have anything else to add.
Great. Well, thank you for listening. We hope that there's something you might have heard that gives you a spark of an idea, a question for consideration moving forward, something maybe you'd want to try in your own program. And I know Melanie has an evaluation or a form. We'd love to hear how this session landed with you. So thank you for filling that out. Does anyone want to come off mute and ask a question or discuss any of your own experiences on these topics? Melanie, did you add to the chat the evaluation link?
I did.
Great, thank you. We really appreciate your feedback. I think it's just a few questions long.
In the chat pod, somebody had asked some questions about our program growth, and I'm sharing some resources for them, links to our a couple of articles, PDF, and another place where we have all of our detailed information about the Latino initiative. So if you want to see the number growth over time, you can see our annual evaluations there too.
Thanks for your engagement in the chat. I'm just catching up on some of the the comments and discussion that you all shared in the chat box. I really appreciate it. And I see that Sue shared our a link to our MFP website. So please check us out there, learn more about the program. There's opportunities to get involved even if you're outside of California. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you so much for joining and for everyone's engagement. It was amazing to hear about the impacts that this program has had. I really feel like programs like this and what you've shared is like at the heart of Extension. So it was really great to hear what everyone is learning and doing. And besides that, like I said in the chat, I will be sending out all the resources and the website and the slides out to everyone who registered. So you can be looking for that in the middle of the week.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your Monday. We'll see you next time.
Bye.